All right, so we're recording. Thank you for joining us for Ask the Experts Q&A on the Student Doctor Network. I am Emil Chuck, Director of Advising Services for the Health Professional Student Association, which publishes SDN. Laura Turner is the Executive Director and is facilitating in the background. This episode's topic reflects the urgent discussion about financing health professional education with the pending implementation of student loan caps and the limitation of repayment options beginning in July of 2026. We have experts here to discuss how to navigate these changes. We also have given them some scenarios which I hope reflect many applicants' journeys to a health professional program through career changes and post-bac options. So welcome everybody, and please introduce yourselves to our audience.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am Kelly Savoy with Sallie Mae. I have been in the industry for 26 years and seen many changes happen throughout those 26 years. Sallie Mae has been in the market for over 30 years, providing private education solutions. We are well positioned to support these changes. We do utilize a custom lending scorecard, which gives us the ability to approve more students. Evolving to meet your needs today, we have implemented a dedicated graduate support team call center to support your needs and answer all of those questions that you might have. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to answer all of your questions. Heather.
Thanks, Kelly. My name is Heather Gomer, also with Sallie Mae. Similar to Kelly, I've been in higher education, admissions, financial aid, and financing for just about 20 years. And, really helping students understand and navigate the financial aid journey, all the way from the undergraduate experience to and through graduate and professional programs has really been a highlight of my career, to help students understand all of their options to make really smart and dedicated decisions. And happy to be here today to talk through some exciting things that are happening connected to financial aid, and to even talk you through some of the more challenging changes that are coming our way. Thank you.
And I'll round it out. My name is Chad Pasorczyk with Sallie Mae. I have 35 years experience in the financial services industry. And I work with our partners today, like Student Doctor Network, bringing Sallie Mae's products and services, financial literacy to students and their members.
Awesome. I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikhil. I'm not from Sallie Mae. I'm from Juno. I've been around much less than my colleagues here. My background was actually in aerospace engineering, if you believe it or not. And I started Juno really as a way to figure out how to get more affordable private student loans for myself. So the model we run is quite simple. We get together large groups of students that are going to be needing loans in upcoming semesters, and we go to lenders and we ask them for more favorable eligibility criteria and more favorable interest rates than they might already be offering in exchange for getting access to this large group that we accumulate. In 2025, about 15% of all private graduate student loans went through Juno, and with this, the change coming in 2026, we have turned our attention to making sure additional populations like the medical and dental and numerous healthcare professions can also benefit from Juno's work. So here we are.
Great, and I know we have one other person, that just joined us. Jason, go ahead. We're just doing introductions at this point. I think you need to unmute first. Let's do that.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I joined Juno just back in November to help build the medical vertical for Juno. I'm a 15-year veteran of the student loan industry, worked just in advocacy for a lot of medical and graduate health programs doing like exit counseling. And when one big beautiful bill was passed, I decided that Juno was the place that I wanted to be at, given the advocacy model that I've already heard Nikhil kind of talking a little bit about here. And it's great to be partnered with SDN as well.
Great. Thank you guys for being here as part of this advice session here for Ask the Experts here. I guess I know when we're recording this, the landscape is still very nebulous. A lot of the regulations have not been finalized, and I think we're going to see them finalized. We're recording today, it's February 2026. The final regulations probably won't be set in stone as it will until June of 2026. So that's a real short time between the regulations being, I guess, finalized and implementation. So for understanding that uncertainty is still in the air, I don't know if I should just pick on Kelly or any of you would just feel, let's just start from the basics here. What do we know about the One Big Beautiful Bill and how it is changing, just a brief summary, how it's changing the financing equation for those individuals pursuing professional education?
Yeah, I'm happy to step in and take a stab at that. Specifically for the graduate and professional students, there are some new loan limits that are being placed on the unsubsidized loan. Currently, grad students do have access to $20,500. There is an $100,000 aggregate limit that's being put on that, and the professional student is being given a annual loan limit of $50,000, which MD students do qualify for that professional student. And there is an aggregate limit of $200,000 with that. There are some legacy provisions with that if you've already borrowed and are continuing in your program. And that's what's still being defined, is that continuation and the implications of that continuation. So what happens if you take a leave of absence? What happens if you change schools, change programs? So those are things that you really need to work closely, and we'll be watching for and work closely with those financial aid offices that you're talking with at the schools. Most impactful is the elimination of the Grad Plus loan, and that will go into effect July 1st, 2026. And again, so that is eliminating access to Grad Plus, and it will be effective for July 1st, 2026. Again, there are some legacy provisions for that. And so you do have to have borrowed a direct loan prior to July 1st, and you do have to remain enrolled in the same program of study at the same school. And so that is still the clarification that's being finalized. It's kind of the same program, same school. We do know that Grad Plus is being eliminated, but the legacy pieces within that are they're still waiting for those accountability measures and what that really means and how that's going to work systematically.
Great, thank you. Heather, go ahead.
The only other thing I'll add to the really significant changes that are happening effective July 1st, 2026, it's maybe the lesser talked about part of these changes is the significant restructuring of federal student loan repayment. What we're going to see is student borrowers really with two options going forward. Really a restructured standard repayment plan or an income-based repayment option that's known as RAP, or repayment assistance. And so really critical to know that the things that you might be reading or seeing on federal student aid websites today might not truly reflect those repayment options that will be available once you enter repayment, especially if that repayment entry will be after 2026.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. Let's see, Chad, I don't know if there's anything more you want to add before I throw it over to Nikhil and Jason.
No, I think they've done a great job covering.
Great. Thank you so much. So Nikhil and Jason, is there anything you would like to add, at least from your perspective?
Not particularly on the federal side, but as I think about the incoming students, right, and as Heather was talking about federal repayment post-graduation, there's still what I would call a good solution over there. I think what's more interesting is to see how the private student loan market evolves and offers, especially during residency, certain repayment plans, and that's going to be very crucial for borrowers to think about, not just, hey, where am I getting perhaps the best interest rate or something like that, but what exactly is my repayment plan during residency, and does the private loan that I'm taking now support a reasonable plan during that period. Historically, I think students didn't have to. When I say historically, I mean while Grad Plus was available in the recent, students didn't really have to think about that, right? They take the loan now and they worry about repayment. Well, when repayment starts, now they have to think forward when they're doing the borrowing. Hey, what exactly am I borrowing? What is the loan term I'm signing up for? And on a stack of $500,000 of debt, what does that look like, post graduation and post residency? So, Jason, I don't know. I think you are the expert here, perhaps.
I mean, very straightforward. Yeah, I would say the repayment assistance plan is, as much as introducing the private marketplace seems like a challenge and a big change that's happening this year. On the repayment side, the fact that for medical graduates specifically, the whole length of residency plus fellowship, and maybe that's not exactly clear to incoming medical students how long they're going to train, but the fact that they can have affordable payments and no negative amortization or no accruing interest, no growth of principal balance over the course of training, and leaving room for some flexibility with private loans, I think that's a great benefit that oft is not highlighted as much as I feel like it should be.
Yeah, and I know this particular topic in this particular session, I know we're going to cover a lot of those things that I think will give a lot of our applicants pause, and hopefully give everybody an idea of at least some of the complications of how much foresight you need to actually put into play when it comes to thinking about your education. I know both of you guys, or both of your organizations, have done a great job networking with other professional societies, talking about a lot of the nuts and bolts, especially when it comes to undergraduate education or strictly graduate education. What I was interested in on behalf of many people who use the Student Doctor Network is the interesting opportunities to transition between one versus the other, and how, quote, real life really does complicate thinking about the financial decisions that you have. For those who are joining us, we've prepared a few cases, and I'm going to go ahead and showcase our first case that really, I think, is an interesting example of talking about someone who is coming from a non-traditional career. They're pivoting to medicine. They already have a family and have been, it's a two-income family. There's children that are going to go through preschool and maybe go a little bit further up. There is a credit rating that's involved, and we can talk about the importance of many of these little items. In this case, this person is looking at doing some sort of post-baccalaureate study. They could be a certificate study or do undergraduate courses, which roughly, I'm saying ballpark, is $50,000. They could do a special master's program, which would be about a $60,000, at least that, with potential guaranteed to be hooked up to a medical school or a professional school of their choice. Sorry, I put the wrong term here. I said cost of attendance. It really should be like cost of living. Whatever happens and what the finances that are going on right now is about $25,000 a year for the whole entire family. So I'm interested in seeing if anybody has any thoughts about, when you're given this case, what advice or what are the main issues that are going to be in play for this person? And also, what sort of advice or resources should one seek to try to help clarify this particular case for this person who wants to ultimately become a physician? I basically leave it open for anybody here, and we can discuss it for a few minutes here.
I think what first comes to mind for me, and I work with many people within this situation, is we always talk about what we call the 1, 2, 3 approach, and first being maximize your free money. So this is somebody, I'd love to know if they're already working within the medical field, within that discipline. Something leads me to believe possibly. But use those resources, because many of them do have scholarships or reimbursement plans to help them get through there. And that's a great first avenue to make sure that we're maximizing that free money, that money that does not have to be paid back, to first make sure that they're maximizing that utilization. And I think that is a great support system to really kick it off and minimize any further debt.
Yep, a great next step, of course, is always filing that FAFSA, maximizing the federal student aid, including the federal student loans that will be available to this individual. And then, as Kelly mentioned, kind of that 1, 2, 3 approach, right? That's really it. The first step is finding that free money, scholarships, tuition reimbursement, any kind of other opportunities that exist. Then that FAFSA with the federal student aid and student loans. And then third would be really looking at and thinking about kind of backing in to an appropriate private student loan amount, right? One that meets the costs of the student's program and even takes into account those living expenses and other things that are part of that individual's life. So when we look at a scenario like this, I'll talk pretty specifically about Sallie Mae here. With our medical loan specifically, we do not require a cosigner, but you'll hear us often say, not only on our website, but really, as we talk to students and as we talk to the professionals at colleges and universities, that cosigners really can help. And so it's really up to each individual applicant, whether they want to bring that cosigner. I know in this case study, we have a spouse that's also working and earning income. Sometimes having a cosigner added into the loan can actually help with approvability, that interest rate offer, and make for a really solid and appropriate loan for this individual. Sallie Mae private loans allow for borrowing up to the full cost of attendance, and that does cover things, in addition to the tuition and fees of the program, but also allows for those living expenses, especially with a family, and knowing that they may be also really significantly having a financial impact in the home with someone leaving the workforce and going back into the education space for this training. So it allows those opportunities for up to full cost of attendance determined by the school, minus the federal aid, minus any other scholarships or other opportunities that are received.
If I can just also add, Heather did mention about cosigners. It's important to understand many of your private loans today, private education loans today, do also offer a cosigner release option. So this is really a person that not only helps with the approvability, but helps support the best interest rate. And they do not necessarily have to be on there for the life of the loan. They really are that support system that helps you to focus on the education, and then, give you that financial foundation. And then once you complete your program, you can petition to have them removed from the loan. It's not a guarantee. There is an application process, but it's different than the original approval. And so you can apply to have them removed from the loan. Therefore, it stands as your own credit and your own loan.
I would add that the uniqueness of having a spouse that's working while someone's in medical school really makes the kind of cost of living a variable expense. I think digging into the budget to determine, how much less they may need to spend if they're diligent and frugal, or how much less they may need to take out in private loans if the spouse is going to continue to work. Obviously, as you said, Kelly and Heather, maximizing any free money that's out there? Is there a commitment maybe to work in an underserved area and looking into like National Health Service Corps, or other of those like either tuition or repayment programs that exist, but really digging into the budget, like one-on-one, a coaching session or something like that, to dig into the budget and determine, what do the expenses look like? How much can the spouse contribute there to maybe potentially even limit? I know I saw a $90,000 cost of attendance plus $25,000 in living expenses. Find out exactly what all that looks like, and do your best, obviously, to limit the private loans as best possible. But I think some digging into the budget there, if they haven't already done so, would be a very helpful exercise.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here to think about also. We're presented really here with this choice between the post-bac program and the master's program. And generally what Juno has found and we are speaking here broadly across many lenders, is that the eligibility criteria and fundability for a graduate program is better than what's available for undergraduate programs. So because from the private student loan perspective. So that's one reason this person might err towards the master's program. And obviously the linkage pathway is extremely attractive, because if you think about, potential regrettability of this borrower at various stages, right? If they go through the post-bac or the master's program, come out with an additional, $75,000 to $85,000 of debt, they really want to make sure that they are on the pathway to getting that MD and getting the increased income that comes along with that post graduation and post residency. So the linkage program, even though the master's program may cost an additional $10,000, to me at least, it sounds like that additional $10,000 is worth the certainty of both fundability of the program as well as the ongoing education that they seek. And then lastly, I agree with my counterparts here on a 2025 context as far as the importance of co-signers. What we are hearing, and I am very constrained from NDAs to disclose what lenders are doing in 2026. But I think broadly speaking, we are seeing a push in certain degrees, and certainly MD is one of them, where lenders are finding ways to increase the approvability of students from those pursuing those steps. So I don't think it would help them in their immediate need in the special, in the post-bac or the master's program. But when they are seeking, loans for the medical program, I think there are private lenders going to be available with or without a cosigner. It's always better to check both your options, because there still could be interest rate differences even if you just get approved without a cosigner. So those are, and one last thing, which is, I added up all the numbers and it comes to around 545K of debt, which is, it's a large number, right? And sometimes you start running into aggregate funding limits across, various lenders out there. So I would make sure that this borrower, as they start this path, is reaching out to lenders and figuring out, hey, is there a option available to me in my fourth year when I get to that point where I'll need more than, 500K or something like that, which tends to be a threshold. So it's worth doing that research.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing your opinions of this. I do want to stick with this this case for a little bit longer. Certainly, the reason why I also have this set up is there are multiple ways for this particular student to be considering their path forward. If they have coursework that's definitely over 7 years old and may not have had a really strong undergraduate GPA, there's always a concern that maybe I should take undergraduate post-bac classes. And so we're talking about maybe 1, perhaps 2 years of post-bac classes. And then perhaps you might raise yourself to a point where you might be eligible for for a special master's program if their GPA was low enough and it warranted it. I want to get a little bit of an idea of the navigation of these different loan caps for ostensibly undergraduate courses, because I'm going to presume that any past debt in undergraduate education does not factor in the calculus. In other words, it's not historical, as far as I know. So please clarify with me. And so kind of figuring out how to navigate these two limits and the aggregate and cumulative limit. I just want to get some insight about that.
So my understanding, and again, we're waiting for final rules on a lot of what's happening connected to especially the federal loan limits. So the final rules that are published by the Department of Education are going to be really critical, in particular of helping a student in this scenario navigate full federal loan eligibility while also likely using private student loan eligibility as well. And so I think to your point, this individual may face, again, depending on if they're going to be considered a post-bac versus a master's, which loan limits they may or may not be up against. We haven't talked about undergraduate loan limits really at this point through the presentation, but they still exist and are, to my understanding, remaining largely unchanged. So we will have undergraduate federal loan limits to be aware of, in addition to, then moving into or potentially a master's or linked program, depending on how it's classified. In those scenarios, we would likely be looking at the loan limits that are at the graduate level, that maximum level of $20,500. Because any master's program that's not one of those professional programs with the $50,000 limit cap, annual limit cap, we would have to revert back to that $20,500. So it does pose some really complicated scenarios, to really map out. And I see up here, how much, somebody maybe could have borrowed in a different pathway as an undergraduate, could really have an impact on what is it exactly that they're going to borrow at the post-bac or grad level, and how much of that prior coursework is going to be accepted. Because even if they took some of these courses, it's likely that there may be some limits at any institution on what they'll accept, and specifically based on grades or GPA or just the simple timing of it. So it does require you to be a really good advocate for yourself with whomever it is that's advising you through the admissions and financial aid processes at the school, to truly understand really exactly how you will be defined at the institution and exactly what classes, and map out that plan very specifically, because those federal loan limit caps are going to be a real predictor of exactly how much you might need to borrow on that private loan side.
Anybody else? So I do appreciate you guys talking through this. And again, I agree. I think it's one thing to really make sure you walk through this. And are there, obviously talking with the financial aid folks at the special master's program, I guess it's an interesting question, because if you wind up entering their linkage program and then your tuition costs go up from 60, and then you add your 4 years of 90,000. I guess it's an interesting question to figure out who one would talk to in the financial aid side of things. So Heather, thank you for at least sort of walking through. Is there anything else that we want to be looking specifically at with the new rules when they come out, when it comes to these types of caps? One of the things that is of interest to me is are these caps ever going to be increasing, or are we going to tie them to inflation? I don't know if there's any talk about whether those caps would do that. So.
Not to my knowledge at this time.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any planned increases or any ties to inflation or other measures.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Let's see. I think we can, let's see if I can go to my case number 2. And this is probably something that a lot of our current students are sort of thinking about. I say medical student in general, just so that we tie to one particular profession, but it can be any of the health professions programs. It can be dentistry, veterinary medicine, and so forth. And so this is an interesting situation that I'm sure is weighing on the minds of many people who have only been told that they have interviewed, but they are an alternate, or they're on our wait list. And so there is, I guess, this is the usual question of, what should we do if you get accepted from the wait list? It's June, and I know we don't have all the rules, but orientation happens to begin after July 1st. We'll get to some interesting nuances of starting before July 1st, but what should people do if you're on an alternate list and you are preparing to hopefully get to start medical school? And so this is the case that we presented to you, and I just want to have you guys get some time to sort of highlight what actions can anyone who's waiting for an offer to take at this point.
I would go ahead and take the opportunity to start getting your financial house in order, and go ahead, make sure you get that FAFSA completed, and go ahead and apply for, start looking at your private loans, comparing what your options are, and seeing what is going to be the best scenario for you. At that point, you have the time on your hands, time ahead of you to sit there and really figure out what's going to be the best option for me should this alternate slot come available, so that then I'm ready to push the button and go ahead and accept that spot.
The other thing I would want a student in this scenario to know is that although, this is a hard spot to be in, right? The waiting, without question and without doubt. But the good news is, especially when we think about a private student loan, is that with almost any lender, but I can speak obviously very specifically with Sallie Mae, the application process is very quick, easy, streamlined, within minutes, within that application, exactly what kind of interest rate offer you'll receive. You'll have opportunity to really learn and read through what all of your repayment plan options are. I know we spoke about that earlier in the session, earlier in the recording, that being incredibly informed and making the right decisions for you about a private loan are absolutely critical. And so this is really advice for anyone, but when you're in this waiting phase, for sure, be sure to research the exact things that we've talked about already. How long of a grace period would I have with this particular lender versus another? What happens with a residency or other types of reasons that I might need a deferment? And this is a great time to do just as Kelly said with shopping around. This is your opportunity to get your finances in order and to really be sure you understand the terms and conditions of private student loans, how and when repayment begins, because you oftentimes have choice here. Sometimes anywhere between 1, 3, or 4 different repayment plan options with some lenders, to really be sure that you're positioned the best that you can be while you're in school. And then also to really think about the long-term impact of borrowing, whether it's federal loans, private loans, or a combination of both, to be sure that you clearly understand the differences and distinctions, those limits, and that you're really prepared when you get the official word to make that ultimate decision. Once a private loan application is received by the school, it usually again now goes into their queue or their timeline of how quickly they can process the loans for the students. And so we are seeing a shift in students borrowing from federal to private. And so that might mean a little bit more time is needed on the school side to be able to approve your private student loan. So that part can also be a little bit nerve-wracking. You've received hopefully the loan approval with all of your terms and conditions of your loans, but then it ultimately goes to the school for approval and determination if you're borrowing the right amount, and when those funds are going to be released to the school. So what the disbursement schedule will look like. So there's a lot that will happen in this scenario very quick once you get the word go.
Mhm.
So take that time, as much time as you can prior to truly inform yourself on exactly what the right loan for you looks like.
I think that credit score also jumps out to me as on the cusp, without getting into details, because obviously it can vary, but that level of credit could produce dubious results. And so I would want to, I think in the very immediate term, find out what short-term things could be done to potentially improve that credit score as well. Like if you have high utilization on a credit card balance, for example, if that can be dealt with, if that can be reduced, that can have a pretty meaningful short-term impact. But we'd certainly like to see that credit score a little higher, given the cost of this program and the obvious need for some private loans if they need to fund it with loans.
Yeah, Jason, I'm right with you there. This slide doesn't mention whether there's a cosigner involved or not. But if there is not a cosigner involved, then like Jason said, there is likely a lot of value in working on that credit score a little bit, as well as shopping around a lot, right? Because I wouldn't be surprised if someone with, we don't know the details here, but I would not be surprised if someone with this um, credit score, let's say they shopped around at 10 lenders, they might get declined at 7 or 8 and get a wide range of rates from the remaining, couple, 2, 3 places they might get approved. So it is always good to shop around, right? But in this particular person's case, it might be even more important to not get discouraged by a couple of no's, and make sure that they are really exploring all of the private student loan options available to them. To the team on this call, Sally May's credit, I have often heard that the custom scoring model that Kelly spoke about at the start is a useful tool, right? And I don't know the details of to say whether this person cannot get approved or there's some cutoff they're running into, but there are many lenders with flexible models, and especially in 26, we are seeing a lot of innovation from lenders on how to expand eligibility for certain degrees. Like I said, MD is very much at the top of that list. So we would expect them to get approved somewhere. They just have to shop around.
Well, and my concern there would be they might get approved someplace, but what would that rate be? And is it a rate that's going to be successful for them? So Jason, I think your point, it was spot on. Take the time now to review your credit, see what's on there, make sure that what's on there is true to you. And if there's anything, any area that you can review on there that can help that credit, take the time to go ahead and get that cleared up and cleaned up so that it fares even that much better, because you certainly don't want a higher interest rate than what is needed and what would be success.
I know that a lot of universities also have their own particular websites that talk about arrangements they've made with other private student loan members, because it is a university. So now you're dealing with a much larger student body population who are like undergrads, law students, business students, and so forth from there. Can you comment a little bit about, especially if this person is in this type of an urgency? My suspicion is their financial aid office will just say, hey, we're going to point you to this university website that highlights the options that the university has relationships with specific private loan members. Can you guys comment a little bit about what to look for there, especially in terms of a one-stop shop versus like a global search?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is what a lot of schools have on their website. They'll call it a lender list, a preferred lender list, a historical lender list, but it typically is a listing of what the school has determined to be lenders that work with their students. So that would include students in this scenario and many, many other scenarios that I know we won't have time to discuss today. But that lender list is likely to include the majority of lenders that are going to make loans available to students at that institution. And so whether there's a preferred arrangement or a historical arrangement, whatever, it doesn't necessarily matter. I think at the end of it all, this is where you do start the shopping. A lot of these lists that the schools maintain have some amazing comparative capabilities so that you can see lender A next to lender B, next to lender C. And you can start to see some of that nuance that we've been talking about of how long is the grace period? How long is the deferment? What are the other features or benefits of this loan? What does repayment look like with this particular lender? And I think that gives you the launching point, the starting point for who to shop around with. And then beyond that, I actually think communication back to your financial aid counselor or your admissions counselor, whomever the person is that you're really working closely with through this admissions process, communicating with them clearly about, denials that might occur, offers that you actually receive. And especially if you receive more than one offer, the school's going to need to know which one of those are you hoping to finish with, especially if you take the loan application all the way through completion with multiple companies. So that open communication and open dialogue is going to be really critical. And that also cues them into the fact that you might be someone that's eligible for other resources or opportunities if you do get accepted into that program. So it's a really nice way to, create a good connection there and to receive some individual guidance from the school. But I think those lists are really that starting point, that launching point for getting that comparative shopping done as quickly as you can.
The one thing I'll add, Heather, though, is those lists are good for comparing features. What I have found is they are horrible for comparing interest rates. It is usually a range or just like as low as kind of number that's quoted there. And it's, we did a study and we found that, a very small percentage of people actually qualify for the lowest advertised rate, even if they have like a 750, 800 credit score, etc. They are not all qualifying for that lowest advertised rate. And even when they do, the terms associated, the repayment plan associated with that lowest advertised rate can be pretty onerous and not something a borrower or their co-signer is willing to sign up for. As a result of that, they might qualify for that in some cases, but still not be able to actually select it. So what we do suggest is using, if lenders offer it or third-party platforms like Juno offer it, using a soft credit check-based tool to find out your exact quote, right, from various lenders. In some cases, it's not possible, and you just have to go through a hard credit check to be able to figure out what a particular lender is going to offer you. We also did a study to understand what's the impact of that hard credit check. And this is public information available on the FICO website, which tends to be the score that most lenders we know of use. And the way it works is the first, and keep me honest, Kelly and Heather, if I go wrong over here, but the first time someone does a hard credit check, there tends to be an impact between 0 to 6 points in a certain time period I'm talking about. So the first time, let's say they're shopping around for the student loans, they do a hard credit check, they have maybe a 0 to 6 point impact on their credit score. But a subsequent hard credit check for a similar product, student loan product, installment loan, is at a different lender, it's going to show up on the credit report as an additional hard credit check, but it is not going to directly impact the score itself, as long as those additional hard credit checks were done in a brief window, 14 days, 30 days, depending on the exact model, of that first check. So that is something just to keep in mind, that you really should not be stopping yourself from doing the full research unless there's some other reason. The hard credit check is not the reason to stop yourself.
You're absolutely right. The hard credit check should not stop yourself. Just like if you're shopping for a car or house, as long as you have like the like credit pull within a 45-day period, it should not adversely affect you. It shows the credit reporting agencies recognize that as you're a smart consumer shopping for your rate. So as long as you do like student lenders within a 45-day period, it's just going to impact you once. You'll see that all of those that you requested to be pulled are on your credit report, but it would only have an impact of one. So that's a good point. And yes, on the lender lists that are out there, it will show you the lowest rate that can be and the highest rate. And that there are regulations as to how those have to be posted and what that, and how that all is handled there. But it does give people a great idea of what is the lowest rate I could possibly get and what would the highest thing. So I think that's an important thing to start with, because it gives you a good gauge to understand where what the possibilities are.
Before I move on to the next case, I do want to just ask very briefly, because we live in this world, what are your thoughts about using AI to help you find these loans and help you with these searches?
Yeah.
I mean, you're really at the mercy, right, of what AI wants you to see, to be honest. To me, that's why I often appreciate the work and the time that the schools do put into those lists that are on their website. Most of the financial aid professionals and the admissions professionals that put those lists together, they've worked with these companies for the most part for years and years. They know how the application process works, how the disbursement process works. They're usually even pretty familiar with repayment and other things that the lenders are doing to help make sure you have a really, really great experience with your loan, or as best of an experience with your loan as you could possibly imagine, to really get you through and after school in a successful way. So those lender lists, I've always really viewed them as safe and reputable. The school took time and did research in compiling those. And there's usually some connection between the school and those individuals that are on the list. And I mean by connection, that history, that knowledge, and just the care that they've thought about for the student scenario and all of this. Even though we call it a lender list, it's really for the student, right? It's to help give you that safe and reputable place to get your search started for what that right loan might be for you.
I might be inclined to encourage this person to use AI to explore gap year opportunities if this doesn't work out. That'd be more inclined to suggest AI for that, because the reality is $400,000, the cost of attendance, and being kind of this late in the game. The case study we showed before was somebody 7 years away from coursework. Taking a year to improve your resume and work as a scribe or doing some sort of productive gap year work could really improve your profile the following year. So I wanted to inject that and to answer the AI question.
No, I appreciate it. As I said, I'm sure I wanted to make sure we touched that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quickly go to case 3, which I know we still have a lot of the rules that are still very variable on it, but we do have certain situations where the legacy provisions are in play. And so we may have a current medical student enrolled at one school that, for whatever reason, winds up having to transfer to a different school for family needs or other reasons. They already have Grad Plus loans that are established. If they wind up getting granted to transfer, and I know that's in and of itself is rare, but if a transfer is allowed, and that person is probably encouraged, knowing from my own side of the house, we usually want the student to start over at year 1. What are the things that this type of a student need to consider regarding their debt management and financial aid? Obviously, they need to have financial aid conversations, but what are some things that sort of stick out to you in this scenario, running really, in this case?
Most prominently, what sticks out to me is they would fall out of that legacy provision. So they would be, they would then fall under the 50,000 unsubsidized loan limit with a 200,000 aggregate, but they would no longer be eligible for the Grad Plus program. And
Yeah,
so that
I-
has to be a serious consideration.
Kelly, I fully agree with your point, and I ran some numbers to evaluate like what's the dollar impact of falling out of that Grad Plus and restarting as a MS1. And the math comes out to, one of the things I took into consideration was they could have perhaps used RAP during their residency period. So this is the analysis I did 4 years out, just assuming that there's a roughly a 4-year residency period. And what happens is at minimum, they're accruing an additional $64,000 of interest. This is assuming at their new program, they've taken roughly $200,000 of federal loans, capped that out, and then taken $200,000 of additional private loans that they would not have, that would have previously been federal loans, but now is private. So, just that alone is going to add $64,000 of additional interest that's going to accrue over those 4 years. And then, of course, the additional amount that they're borrowing is also, it's not like the debt from the first program goes away. That's still there and accruing interest. So it is a pretty, the overall number is $250,000. So this person needs to decide whether it is worth spending an additional $250,000 to meet that family need. And obviously, this is not a financial decision. This is an emotional and financial decision. But it's important that they be aware that they're making a $250,000 decision. It's not, trivial decision that they're making here.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, as I said, I do appreciate it. And again, the thinking about doing this is not as, it certainly has gotten a lot more complicated to also consider the way that the loans and so forth. Let me go to case number 4. Another circumstance that certainly I hope does not happen is if you lose a scholarship, especially significant full tuition scholarships such as the health professional students, health professionals, HPSP service, as well as potentially the medical scientist training program, which is usually full tuition. What are some conversations if one falls into these types of situations? What should one think about in terms of having those conversations with financial aid and as they wish to continue in their education?
I think this is where some of the final rules are going to become incredibly important for this community. A lot of what we've heard so far is that the student scenario specifically really matters, and how that school is reporting the student's program of enrollment. I see things here like, a dual enrollment program, a dual degree. I think we absolutely need the final guidance to be able, in my opinion, to speak significantly to the student changing a program. And I don't know if we have any further clarity on when those final rules are come into play, but it's going to be a really critical and key detail, specifically to helping a student in this scenario. I think another thing to really think about is exactly how the school classifies a student in this scenario beyond program, but about how they're doing towards their successful academic progression or satisfactory academic progression. There are some pretty strict rules around satisfactory academic progress on the federal loan side, and some lenders have similar rules on a private student loan side. So it'll be very clear for the student to understand exactly how the financial aid office is classifying their academic progress based on needing to repeat coursework or entire semesters or sections. And so this could be one of those scenarios where we see someone on what we call probation or other scenarios that might impact that federal student aid eligibility. And some lenders on the private side also have restrictions there. So one of those provisions that's usually in, not necessarily the first thing a student is shopping for when they're looking for their student loan options, but understanding whether or not a lender supports students through these types of scenarios where they need another semester, they need a repeat, or maybe suddenly they're going to have a much larger funding gap than they come to the lender for in a prior term or a prior year. Those things are going to be really critical, and it's going to be, I think, absolutely important for the student to have very detailed and specific conversations with their financial aid professionals to make sure they understand how they're being classified academically, and if that change in academic program, again, removes them from that Grad Plus legacy provision.
I would just add that if you're failing the USMLE Step 1, whether you're a scholarship recipient or not, it's time to really turn up the heat on making sure that you're passing your exams. And then regarding, if the NIH grant is revoked because a student selectively wants to only pursue MD versus also the PhD, this could be a proactive decision they've made on their own, and something that they've chosen to do, to take on the debt and kind of pivoted. So understanding their intentions, I think, is critical too.
Kelly, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I would just also say this is where, and Heather started with this is where proration can also play an effect, where we're still waiting on the final rules, but that can affect the eligibility with not only their unsubsidized, but also with their Grad Plus, because the rules for that is changing, and they could have less money available and therefore be facing even more of a gap. So to be talking closely with that financial aid office will be key.
Laura, let's go ahead. I know we have 2 slides left, so the first of the last 2 slides. While we're talking about financial aid officers, given the circumstance, I do want to get your advice about how to ask for more scholarship money, or the free money, as it were. Is there a good time? Can I negotiate after I even enroll? I just want to get some ideas and thoughts about the effective ways of at least trying to secure scholarship money, at least with whoever you've worked with in the financial aid office.
I can kick this one off. Working in both admissions and financial aid, and now on the student lending side for a number of years, every school is going to approach this very different. So as we make these comments, just be aware that every school is going to have a different process and likely a different timeline or kind of good time to do this. But the first statement that I absolutely want to always make when I talk about this is what we're really asking the financial aid office or the admissions office to do is to reconsider how they feel about you at the institution. As you are hopefully a scholarship or grant recipient, when we're talking about institutional funds, they made a decision about your application at the time of admission, alongside all of the other individuals that they were considering for those same opportunities. So sometimes funding is limited and there's just strictly not additional opportunity. But what the financial aid office is always going to want to know is if something is very different about your life circumstance than what that FAFSA reflects. So make sure that anytime there's something really significant happening, whether it's with your credit, whether it's with your income, a spouse's income, or the size of your family, anytime something significant about your finances changes, that's the time to talk with financial aid. That FAFSA doesn't always know about all of these things, and maybe some of those grants and scholarships were need-based and you weren't considered for them based on what that FAFSA showed them. So when we kind of ask, is there a good time? Anytime there's a significant change to your finances and your financial situation, that's the good time to talk to them. But if it's simply to negotiate because you feel as though you deserve additional funds or you qualify for more than maybe you were offered, be ready to make your case, and be ready to significantly try to convince them of why it is you deserve additional funds over someone else, because that's oftentimes what happens with especially limited institutional funds, is they have to allocate them out in the best way possible, the most equitable way possible, or that meets a specific scholarship or grant criteria. So be prepared to go through a process, oftentimes called professional judgment or professional review, where they're going to ask a lot of questions, and really you'll be the one that's expected to advocate for yourself for those funds that are beyond what the FAFSA situation is really demonstrating for you. I hope that helps.
I think one point I'd add to Heather's on the, not the need-based side, Heather, I think you covered that exceptionally well. Perhaps on the merit-based side is, there's often this question of like, if I have additional offers, acceptances from other programs, is it okay to share that? Or am I, people have all kinds of emotions around that. And generally what we suggest is to share it politely and be sincere. Don't try to say something or represent something that's false, right? If it's truly something that's going to make a difference in your decision, that's what you should be presenting, because schools do care about that. So they might call it yield, or it just might be an emotional thing or something else. I'm not as purview to, I've not spoken to thousands of admissions or financial aid folks. I think the Sallie Mae team here has more experience in that regard. But what we do have experience with is hearing back from graduate students who've approached their financial aid offices, and we've seen time and time again. We ran a survey to try to understand this behavior better, and sharing politely that there might be a different offer that you have is in consideration, right? Can help your situation from a merit perspective. It's not really going to move the needle from a need-based argument or those funds that are allocated based on need. But if there is a merit-based fund available, it may make the difference.
Great, thank you guys so much. I know my last slide, I know we're gonna sort of unfortunately leave on a little bit of a downer, because of course many of the people that I also work with also face continuing education costs too. And I'm gonna guess that I'm not sure whether these are covered by the regulations or whether they will be covered one way or another. Like, I know for residency programs we're used to on at least medicine and pharmacy, they're underwritten by some, by the hospital or some other organization. But especially for dentists and for veterinarians, a lot of residency programs will also charge tuition. And I don't know whether you guys have any insights or thoughts about how the new regulations are going to basically add an additional consideration for people pursuing specifically those fields, as well as other fields for which there's a tuition charge for continuing education and and credentialing. So before we do a full wrap up, I just wanted to get your thoughts about how you have, or your groups have worked with such individuals that I want to be an oral maxillofacial surgeon versus, or a veterinarian who does a lot more surgery and stuff like that. So I just want to get some ideas about how Sallie Mae and how Juno, what your experience has been working with people in that situation.
Yeah, this has actually been an area of focus for us. So we've been talking to lenders for several months now to make sure that these programs are covered. From the federal perspective, what we, for the students entering this year, let's say into a dental specialty, they are going to see that they have utilized, they're going to run up on like 160, 40.5 into 4, right? That's what they've kind of used up. So they're going to run into those caps really quickly over there. Those caps do roll over into the next program, right? Even though it's still dental, it's a new program, but those caps will continue to be in place. So it is likely that they will need private funding to cover these caps, assuming they've borrowed their maximum each year from the federal unsubsidized program in previous years. And Juno is well prepared to ensure that all of these students, most of these students, and even without co-signers, because they're getting to that point in their careers where it might be less, they may hesitate more in asking a parent perhaps to co-sign. So we are well prepared for these specialty programs.
Well, let me give you guys at least a few more minutes to sort of wrap up. And again, I do thank you guys for presenting with us today. Tell us a little bit about what Sallie Mae is doing, I guess, and what services you do provide for aspiring health professionals. And then I'll also hand it over to Juno to do your pitch too.
Thanks so much. I'll kick us off, and I'll let Kelly wrap up on the things that I said about Sallie Mae. So I'll just say, I think like everyone, we realize that this is a big shift and a big change for students and for schools. And so we are working really hard. I think just like everyone, and just like Nikhil said, we're trying to understand everything that we maybe haven't always been involved in the past. And what that means for us is a lot of research, a lot of conversations, a lot of work with the college and university partners to make sure we are meeting the needs of students exactly where they're at going forward. Doing things like really bolstering our customer service, making sure that we have dedicated support lines for graduate and professional students, and that we're prepared to talk to all of you in a way that's appropriate for you in your scenario. The other thing that I'll say is I think we're really proud of being like vertically integrated. So everything that happens from a student, whether it's coming to our website to find a scholarship, all the way through that application experience, during your in-school period, and even throughout residencies or deferments and grace period and repayment, we're here to navigate all of that with you on an individual basis. Even though we're helping, lots and lots of students, it really is about you. And our systems allow us to work at that level to truly support you. And so I hope that all of the things that we're doing and have been doing for many, many months, and the things that we'll continue to innovate and integrate will really help you forward with some really great and customized support. And so at the end of it all, I think my final words would be, thank you for being part of this webinar and listening through on these case studies and letting us share some insights. And I'll turn it over to Kelly quick for any other final thoughts.
No, I think well said. And yes, we continue to look at what we can offer and what we can do to support you through the entirety of your journey. Have many different resources available, and I think financial education is a great starting point. We all need a little more of that, so take the time to and today is part of that, to really understand what you're signing up for, what is best for you, and what your situation is. So thank you all for joining today, and thank you for having us.
I appreciate it. Sorry that your audio didn't quite come in. Hopefully the recording will have taken it up. So I appreciate it, but thank you so much, Kelly. And hopefully we'll be able to have that transcribed at some point. Nikhil and Jason, go ahead.
Nikhil, you go first, I think, and I'll put an exclamation point on anything that you share here.
Absolutely. Oh, anything I miss as well. Yeah, I think we are incredibly excited. It's an interesting time. I think the changes are very challenging, right, in terms of the Grad Plus program going away. What has amazed me in having spoken to, I would say, almost all lenders in the space and understanding what they are doing to better serve students is that they are really stepping up to the challenge over here, right? And this means they're making sure the money is available through private student loans for this community, right? For the MD community. They are working hard to ensure the eligibility criteria changes that need to happen to make sure this community is better served is happening, right? And what we are really proud of at Juno is to, advocate, really understand the students' needs, go ahead and advocate for those changes. And some lenders are going to be offering the best version of their product with reduced rates lower than what they even offer on their own websites through Juno. So we're excited to create those offers and make those available. In terms of making sure borrowers are making the correct decisions. We spoke about this, I think, multiple times on the call now, that it's so important now to, think consciously about what loans you're picking. It almost matters less so which exact lender, but more so what are the features of the loan, what is the repayment plans for those loans, etc., that you select. And we are here to guide our members through that. So we offer one-on-one sessions. You can literally get on a one-on-one Zoom call with me, Jason, 15 other people on the team who are very, very well versed both on the private student loan side and the federal student loan side, and discuss your situation one-on-one. We'll do spreadsheets with you. We'll, speak to you in your language to help you understand your options and help you figure out what's the best option for you. Jason.
Yeah, no, I exactly that. I'm doing a lot of that now. Obviously, I think education is really important. So I appreciate you guys inviting us here and getting our perspective. Heather, like you said, meeting people where they are and understanding things that maybe we didn't have to understand before, given this new reality. As we're going through some of these case studies, it's like we want to consult this or coach this person on getting credit utilization, their credit card utilization lower, because there'll be some success opportunity there. So education and advocacy are critical components, and it's good to hear all of us in the marketplace talking about that.
So again, thank you so much. I appreciate your patience in having us go a little bit over time, but obviously this discussion and this topic is just so critical. I thank all of you guys from Sallie Mae and Juno for all the work that you're doing, and especially in terms of the ecosystem of people involved in these types of questions, and the important role you guys have been, and the important work you guys have been doing to date. So on behalf of anybody who listens to this webinar, thank you guys so much for sharing your insights with us, and thank you again for being part of our Q&A series. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, let me see if the